This video is a small deviation from the current series on the Wullen-Weber circularly disposed antenna arrays we've been looking at recently. You all seem to be enjoying those videos and the feedback has been great, but I need to address something that's been niggling at me for a long time. Duga 3 does not exist. You know, the Duga radar, the woodpecker, the Chernobyl antenna, the over-the-horizon radar thingy in Call of Duty. Call it what you like, but Duga 3 does not, never has, and never will exist, and I'm going to tell you why. Since the Call of Duty game and the urbex phenomenon that is Chernobyl has gained a cult following in recent years, I hear the name Duga 3 being bandied around on forums, social media, YouTube videos with millions of views, and even news websites. The name Duga 3 is used frequently, even in the comments of some of my videos when talking about the woodpecker or that famous Duga over-the-horizon radar array that towers out of the forest near Chernobyl within the Chernobyl exclusion zone. Oh, and another thing, we associate the woodpecker with this array, but this structure is in fact only the receive site, with the transmit site being demolished many years ago, but fair enough, this imagery is all we have left. The fact of the matter is that Duga 3 has never existed, and here's where the confusion lies. The Soviet Union had been working on early radar for their ballistic missile systems throughout the 1950s and 1960s, but most of these were line-of-sight systems that were really only useful for rapid analysis and interception. None of these systems had the capability to provide an upper hand in the form of an early warning of a launch within seconds or minutes that would give the Soviet defences time to study the attack and plan a response. As a conventional radar can only see as far as the horizon, the Duga radars bounce their signals off the ionosphere, enabling it to see over the horizon. An over-the-horizon radar in the USSR would help solve all of these problems, and work began in the late 1960s. An important thing to remember is that all of the radar sites built as part of the Soviet Union's over-the-horizon radar development and rollout is that each radar had two sites, a transmitter and a receiver. The first experimental system associated with Duga was built outside the Black Sea port of Mykolaiv in southern Ukraine. This successfully detected rocket launches from Baikonur Cosmodrome 1600 miles away. After the experimental system was deemed to be successful enough to continue the program, the prototype Duga was built on the same site that was able to track launches from the Far East and submarines in the Pacific Ocean. This is the transmitter site. Remember, these things come in pairs. The transmitter bounced the signal off the ionosphere and the receiver site captured the echoes coming back. Nothing but a concrete foundation remains now, but this would have been home to a massive radar, similar to the famous one we see at Chernobyl, with all of the radio transmitter equipment being housed inside large buildings. The output power of this site isn't known, but it would have been extremely powerful, requiring a big electricity supply and high-powered transmitters. The array would have been at least 200 meters long by about 25 meters wide. Today the site is still used for radio and it looks like either broadcast or military. 60 miles to the north of the transmitter is the receive site for the experimental Duga system that sits northeast of Mykolaiv. Like the transmitter site, this has been completely removed. It measured at least 350 meters long by 40 meters wide, so it was considerably bigger than the transmitter to enable optimum receive capability. Next to the array is the former site of a Soviet Krug circularly disposed antenna array that was used for HF direction finding, and I've done a full series on these which you can find in the description below and at the end of this video. Both the experimental and the first prototype Duga systems were aimed east and were fairly low powered compared to what came next. With the concept proven, work began on an operational system. This new system was called Duga 1 and was built in 1972. Due to its use of higher power, the transmit and receive sites were separated by 37 miles. This would prevent the receive site from being overwhelmed by the transmission signal. This is the Duga 1 transmitter site, sat in secluded forest 31 miles northeast of Chernobyl, west of Cherniv and south of Gomel. Nothing remains today except the building, and the concrete base has been reclaimed by nature, so it's hard to tell how big the array itself actually was. Just south in thick woodland is a clearing that houses the equipment to power the massive antenna system. Now we come to a familiar site, the receive array for Duga 1. This is the world-famous megastructure that lies within the Chernobyl exclusion zone, northwest of Chernobyl, south of Minsk, and northwest of Kiev. It's been the subject of documentaries, news reports, YouTube videos, urban exploration websites, and everything in between. This is commonly mislabeled as either the Duga transmitter or Duga 3. This thing is colossal, measuring in at over 700 meters long and 150 meters tall. It's the only preserved relic from the Soviet Duga over-the-horizon radar project because the area is deemed too dangerous to go in for long periods of time to take it down. Deep in the forest to the southwest is another Soviet thick 8 and fixed 24 direction finding site that is the only one left in a state of decent preservation. Our last pair of radar sites is known as Duga 2. Duga 2 was near to Komsomolsk-on-Amur in Khabarovsk Krai in Russia, with the receiver being 4,235 miles away from the Duga 1 receiver near Chernobyl in Ukraine. This site still appears to be in use by the military today, but all trace of the huge radar receive site that would have been very similar to the one at Chernobyl has gone. Military vehicles and a helipad can be seen on the ground not far from the large concrete base. Nearby, another Soviet Vuhlenweber Circle concrete base can be seen in the forest. 40 miles to the southeast is the Duga 2 transmitter site. This was used up until recently as a radio site but has now been completely demolished, making it hard to tell that such a large transmitter site once stood here. So I'll leave you here, at the 6th location of the 3rd site of the 4th Soviet over-the-horizon radar related to the name Duga. Yeah, it's easy to see where the confusion came from. But there you have it, there was only Duga 1 and Duga 2 after the experimental over-the-horizon radar and the prototype. Duga 3 does not and has not ever existed.